and subscribe, and my stories will thrive. Welcome to another video by the Blue Tongues of Hell for some more Hildar Chronicles. This 15th chapter is called The Haunted Blade. Kyoko hung on to Freyr's mane as tight as she could, while the horse stormed through the somber fields towards Helheim. Surprisingly, the ride was not rough, and Kyoko could tell that this horse was doing its best to somehow compensate for each heavy hoof mark digging into the soggy soil and grazing flint paths. The smell of flint sparks from Hilda's own hooves as she galloped ahead reminded Kyoko of the Kiribi ritual her grandmother would perform before someone went on a long journey into the mountains or out at sea. The sun was setting, and she pictured Pakusa striking flint stones together. Bring us luck, we'll need it, thought Kyoko, hearing distant moans of the undead. The horses stumbled over a few obstacles in the creeping dusk, and Kyoko caught glimpses of mangled bodies trampled by Freyr and Hilda. She held on even tighter to Freya's neck. Further west, the night had not yet settled in the thrones of the gods. The Nibelungen Mountains were living up to their regal reputation as they bathed in the molten rock rays of a dying sunset. Harald admired the bloody scarlet outlines around the towers of slate and imagined how the light was being nibbled away by armies of shadow ants, shaping the future without anybody noticing. Inside the mountains of slate, the caves were how Icto Ixin's guests had expected. Damp, chilly, and gloomy. Bats fluttered mysteriously, and spiders unpleasantly crawled all over the four visitors who obediently followed the small man in purple boots. Astrid held on to Tora's arm as they crossed a narrow stone bridge leading to an iron door, wedged in a massive wall of slate that had no visible top or bottom. Asmund gave the drop a peek. One misstep, and he doubted anyone would find his fallen body.
I would avoid that if I were you. But if I were you, you would probably survive. Please, hurry forwards. The opening will shut itself in a few moments.
Icto said, ushering everyone through the doorway.
how welcoming that would be if I had you all crushed to mush due to faulty vault security.
Hedil's slit eyes and wrinkled forehead told Asmund that they shared the same concern. He felt up to the challenge of whatever danger lay ahead, but there were little details along the way that challenged his sanity. What was the music he could hear, sung by sirens, in this gloomy cavern that reeked of oil and heather? Low humming and clicking suggested the place was infested with insects too. Possibly glowworms and fireflies. But what were the grey boxes and coiled strings stuck to walls? Why didn't Ikto use a key to get in? He had touched the door with his index finger, and it had opened.
I don't mean to keep you in the dark, my friends of Ash Island, but on the other hand, I do not wish to give you a shock that might harm your fragile nervous systems.
Ikto stepped backwards and opened his arms.
Brace yourselves. I will try to do this gently,
he said, tapping his left palm twice with his right hand's index finger. Tora squeaked when a bright light popped out of Ikto's palm. It painted their faces blue, and the Norse warriors immediately drew their blades. Ikto smiled patiently.
From where I come from, or should I say from where my biological template came from, this is our way of doing many things.
Tora didn't waste any time and slipped a dagger under Ikto's throat. Watch it, Wormhair. Cut the witchcraft now. Ikto replied calmly.
Tora, that is your name, isn't it? I suppose you know from where this name derives. Your proud parents must have had great expectations when giving birth to Thora, the female heir of Thor. You shouldn't be afraid, Tora. No lightning will strike from this apparatus. It is our way of simply turning the lights on.
Tora dug the sharp metal into Ikto's skin. But it didn't bleed. The wailing music stopped.
I could bleed, if that would make you feel better. Though I'm sure you would prefer me to show you where you really are first, no? Let me press my palm, and you will see more clearly.
Tora looked for Hedil's approval, and he gave her an uneasy nod. Ikto flicked his fingers on his left palm and ticked hovering jewels. The gloom evaporated. A shower of white light blinded them enough to lose track of where Ikto had gone. Tora swung her dagger around wildly, nearly catching Asmund's cheekbone, and she cursed into the misty light. a deformed voice hooted out from what seemed far away.
Fear not, my brave friends. Now that the plaster has been ripped off, you can rub your eyes and have a look around. Whatever you see will be odd, but don't let that baffle you. And please make yourselves at home until my maker arrives.
I don't know about you, but I don't trust this witch one bit, said Asmund, beginning to see blurry objects all around him. We've been drugged. He must have blown black henbane into our faces. Or the trap we fell into was a fungus pit. I don't know, Asmund. This feels pretty real, said Hedil, touching a smooth, cold surface that didn't feel like anything he knew. That's what drugs do, replied Astrid, knocking over a metallic object on a grey table. A sliver of glass shattered, leaving a trail of red liquid worming through a maze of shards. The sound of stringed instruments and ethereal singing resumed. There were no musicians as far as the four could see, although they were probably hiding in another room. The sinister cavern they were just standing in was now a dazzling white-painted chamber with tall, thin, stained glass windows that suggested impossible views beyond. 8 lead-white walls glided upwards, converging in an octagonal hole that allowed starlight to filter through. Many lavender-grey caskets decorated the surrounding walls, and they were covered in a shiny, smooth bubble of glass that didn't seem possible to forge. There again, neither did Radgrid's fiery belt or Njal's death hammer. I don't know what I was expecting to find here, said Asmund. But it takes an enchanted place to forge mystical weapons. Cursed, I would say, said Tora, sniffing a hot glass jar connected to a flimsy white object that had a tail stuck into a square tile carved into a wall. The jar's black liquid smelt of spices and nuts, and was quite unusual. Found the poison. A hissing cloud of mist burst out of one of the mural caskets, causing Tora to burn her forearm on a coffee pot. The twirls of vapor matched the orchestrated music soaring through the air as a dark green fluid was drained out of the pot and disappeared somewhere below, out of sight. A dry click, followed by a decompression of air, erased the gooey glass cover and revealed where Icto Ixin must have been hiding. Astrid was the closest to him in his steaming coffin. She frowned up at him, sleeping there with his arms crossed over his chest, and prepared to block anything he was about to throw at her. Nevertheless, it only took a flick of an eyelid to pierce her heart, and the man's violet eyes rolled open wide. A sudden blast of hot air struck her nerves again, and Icto's curly iron blue hair and gelatine skinny body was dry in an instant. During the theatrics of the heat wave, Icto had somehow dressed into the black suit he was wearing when he had greeted the Norseman outside. He uttered.
Early bird catches the germ. 909. Update, please.
Another Icto appeared out of nowhere behind Hedil and strutted through the small crowd.
Rude awakening. My apologies, sir. Security protocol 5.7. Hibernation cycle cancelled due to indigenous intrusion. Norseman contained. Theoretical lab ingredients selected. Coffee brewing. Great initiative, 09. Help me down, would you?
Said the woken man, with a different accent to the first Icto. All four stepped back.
Norseman, I'm sure my loyal friends explained to you already. We are no zombies from Nebelwood, nor drogs. I was asleep, and I need a hot cup to wake me up. Who the hell are you two? Brothers?
Asked Asmund. The iron blue-haired Icto observed Hedil and Asmund from head to toe and replied,
Not quite bros, but close though. 909 performs daily duties that I am incapable of. He's done so for such a long time, he must be getting bored, waking me up whenever someone pops in for tea. He fears nothing, if not my own tragic death, and he will outlive you all. Where I come from, he would be named a Skymo or Skyman. Someone who was industrially designed and synthesized by, well, synthetic beings. Don't let me confuse you more. Let's sit down and have a mug.
09 helped the man to a round white table, sat him down, and went to fetch some victuals. The four guests did the same and slid into legless white chairs that consisted of one single strip of some molded substance.
That's called neoplastic, not fossil fuel junk made out of our ancestors like you, but synthetically pure plastic. Debatable, I know, but let's move on. I am the real Icto, by the way.
09 stealthily approached like a ghost and placed a colorful tall mug in front of Icto. It had a finely painted damsel on it, with deformed eyes and long blonde hair.
Oh, 9 here is just a flawless copy,
said Icto with a smirk.
Switch your voice patch again, eh? Growing out of your own shoes, I see.
I evolve within my programming, sir, in harmony with the void. From a wooden tray, 09 shared pastries and 4 other smaller pretty mugs for the guests. Sugar, perhaps. Tora sniffed the air longingly, but nobody dared to taste the warm beverage.
Out of all the dangers you 4 have encountered in your lives, do these exotic drinks mark you as being deadly worthy opponents? 909 must have told you already. Killing you is not on the menu today. If we wanted to do that, do you think sharing a pot of my last stock of coffee would be the best option?
Poison has its merits, said Astrid, staring at 09. If you don't want to kill us, Icto, what do you have in mind exactly?
And tell us who you are,
said Hedil, banging the table, spilling a few last rare drops of Icto's coffee. Icto Ixin spread his long fingers around the white mug, breathed in deeply, and let a sip of coffee roll around his mouth. Snakes of warm steam slipped through his open lips before he let the hot liquid trickle down his throat. He sighed, then opened his eyes while gently shaking his head.
Remind me who you are first, kind guests. This is my home, and it has been for longer than you could ever imagine. Who are you, and what do you seek here?
Asmund wasn't amused by the thin man, and had it in him to test how indestructible this second demon or god was. Despite his brewing anger, he couldn't stop his eyes from wandering, taking in all the outlandish paraphernalia lying about. The glass house at the opposite end, cluttered with strange objects that he guessed were for cutting meat and vegetables. The painting of a dark-haired woman wearing a similar dress to Kyoko's, walking along a red path parallel to another that led to the mouth of a stone giant. And moreover, the green table with coloured china balls and shiny wooden bowls.
Icto Ixin. My name is Asmund of Ognish and Skegerd. I have come with the kings of Helheim and Muspelheim, who are waiting outside to seek the legendary forges of Nibelungen. For which purpose?
Asked Icto.
We hope to hammer powerful weapons into existence here to rid our lands of the undead curse. My father's legendary gripper was said to be useless, whereas the death hammer and fiery belt have proven to be highly destructive, but not enough to beat all the biters into oblivion. We know these weapons came from the Nibelungen Mountains. O9, pass me the gauntlet, please.
O9 didn't look convinced by the point of his master's request. The gauntlet was always handy when things got ugly, but they were hardly dealing with dragons. He didn't complain, though, and went to get the silver metal glove in a concealed wall alcove.
Does this item strike you as familiar, Sir Asmund of Agni?
Asmund disliked Isigto's condescending tone, but could not deny his surprise to see one of Agni's iron grippers. Are they fake too? Asked Hedil, who had heard the stories of King Agni's demise on the battlefield.
I would suggest you stick your hand into it and tell me, young man. But I feel that would ruffle a few feathers. Son of Agni, would you like to try it on?
Hedil nodded to Asmund, who didn't wait for his approval and stood up to take the glove from O9. Astrid tapped her mug with a finger of many rings. Looks too small for your lusty mitts. Let me try it on, fish face. Asmund ignored her and squeezed his right hand inside. His large fingers tingled slightly. Could have been pins and needles, although Asmund doubted the lightweight glove would have compressed his blood flow that quickly. O9 raised a finger. I advise you, Asmund, to have a belt and braces approach with this weapon. If your father's set of gauntlets were counterfeits, this one is quite the opposite. Use with extreme caution. Astrid grumbled and went to inspect the larder on wheels, where a coffee pot was brewing without a flame beneath it. On her way, she imitated Asmund as he rotated his wrist back and forth to admire the pretty little gauntlet. It had less sheen to it than his father's grippers that had tempted him so many times as a little boy. The gloves were always there in the castle, hanging over the fire like a hunting trophy. A symbol of the king's power over the island of Vanaheim, when it used to be called that. All the king had to do was put them on, and he could crush his enemies like flies. A myth, as it turned out, and this tinny toy glove felt the same. He strolled over to an intriguing triangle of red balls on a carpet of green felt and picked one up with his left hand, sliding his fingers over the polished hard surface. 09 was about to say something, but Icto placed an index to his lips, signaling otherwise. Asmund dropped the red ball that rolled and clinked against the white one. He had seen something more appealing, a sword. What it was doing on the floor in a corner of this chamber, Asmund had no idea, but the blade was enormous, bigger than him, a giant's blade. If it weighed as much as it looked cumbersome, no wonder the thin twins hadn't bothered to move it.
Fine choice, Asmund. That will give you some measure of what the gauntlet can really do. But first, try to pick it up with your left hand.
Icto finished his mug of coffee and asked for more. Astrid came to him with the coffee pot before 09 could respond and asked if Beanstalk would like a refill. Tora watched the dark waterfall of enticing warmth splosh into Icto's mug and couldn't resist any longer. She shoved her mug into Astrid's face. When only a few drops had been spilled on the floor and table, Tor gave the drink a quick sip. Her pupils dilated, and she felt a pleasant tingle in the back of her neck. Another sip was required. Hedil joined in. He was thinking of how he could ask why there were barely visible traces of old bloodstains leading to the laboratory without offending the hosts and starting a fight. He considered finishing the treats first. Despite the obvious oddities everywhere he looked, there was something else going on. Something ominously dangerous he couldn't detect, and it was spoiling his delicious lemon cakes. Astrid poured him some coffee. Meanwhile, Asmund was red in the face, huffing with all his might to lift up the sword with his left hand. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto the dusty thick black blade, leaving a dark trail behind as it fell to the shiny white floor.
Now, try the right hand,
said Icto, with his mouth full of jam and creamy pastry.
Easy does it.
Asmund did not listen and expected the same resistance as before. Gripping the hilt with the gauntlet, Asmund tried to heave the sword up with all his might. The sword took off like a gigantic eagle, ripping Asmund off his feet and sending him flying through the air. Hedil knocked his mug over, while Tor nearly choked herself on a scone. Asmund and the juggernaut blade smashed into the greenhouse and demolished an iron tank that splattered green fluid all over the white tiles. Asmund crashed into a table covered in a bubble of glass. and the glove slipped off his hand and rattled away. He moaned like one of the undead, holding his wrist that had snapped in two.
You ignoramus. We told you to go lightly,
said 09.
Look what you've done to the lab. Master, we've lost the catalyst fluid. And the sword is... For heaven's sake, what now?
Asked Dicto, getting up. Asmund was stuck behind the glass door that wouldn't open. He smeared the blood all over it in ugly runes, trying to find the way out. Hedil poked his head through the broken glass and saw plenty enough that needed explanations. 09 pressed a hovering button over his left palm and tugged the prince backwards. Hedil was about to swing his elbow round to break a few bones when the glass instantly repaired itself and went black as a beetle. Where Asmund had been battering the glass cage with his left hand, the opaque surface melted away and left a gaping oval opening.
Come along,
said Icto impatiently.
I can fix that arm in a jiffy. If you don't get sliced, I can have avocado by that shut-in door. Hurry.
Of course, the dematerialized door was not a guillotine. That wouldn't be very practical on a daily basis, unless intruders needed to be dealt with. These invited intruders were not an immediate threat and would be allowed to enjoy a few more rounds of tea and coffee.
Are you all right, Asmund?
Asked Hedil, seeing an ulna bone sticking out of his torn flesh. He dug his hand into a pocket and rummaged around for Kyoko's yukata rag, then revised his good intention.
Silly question, perhaps.
Asmund noticed the hesitation, but couldn't face another argument while forcing himself to keep a straight face under such acute pain. Well, you great Dumbla in a stalagmite cave. Finish playing with your toy? Feel like letting the other children play now? Said Astrid, dabbing a drying cloth in coffee that she thought might work as a bandage. Asmund pushed her soggy rag away.
The blade. Why was it shining brighter than gold?
Asked Hedil.
No idea.
Said Icto, honestly.
First, we need to take care of the flying Norseman. He's dripping blood everywhere. Follow me to the infirmary, so we can tend to that broken arm. The glove,
uttered Asmund. Icto dismissed the young man's impatience and swiped his left palm. A rose flicker of light waxed and waned over Icto's hand, and the sound of slabs of ice being slid on a frozen lake caught everyone's attention. Where drops of coffee and regenerative fluid once stained the immaculate milk floor, a hole in the tiles now revealed a metallic spiral staircase boring into the ground below. The burning in Asmund's wrist was so excruciating that he barely noticed the ceiling materialize above his head as he followed Ikto down the stairs. During the time it would take to milk a dozen ewes, the downward spiral had not reappeared, and Asmund had not returned yet. Tora was not feeling too well, and rested in a comfortable armchair, padded with the softest material she had ever touched. Her head was boiling up, and it wasn't related to the confusion she was feeling. Why were the weirdest objects she had ever seen all in one place? In this octagonal room, in the heart of the Nibelungen Mountains. She closed her eyelids and sank into delirious dreams. Astrid sat on the floor beside her and placed a coffee-damp cloth on her forehead. She softly sang a lullaby to the sick archer that nobody else could hear, and shed a tear onto Tora's chest. Sleeping sister of the night, when the plains are red as snow, drop thy petals golden white upon the thrones of gods below. Hedil didn't hear the sorrowful song. He was too busy badgering O9 to open the black glass doors. He tried to bargain his way in, saying that if the Nibelungen dwellers had nothing to hide, then taking a peek at the glove and blade inside the opaque greenhouse surely wouldn't ruffle any feathers. 909 agreed with the logic. He admired simplicities of oral forms, and yet his survival depended on complexities that even he sometimes couldn't fully decipher, and that often implied withholding certain realities from the indigenous populations of this island. Why Ikto had shown the gauntlet to Asmund bemused him. The only fragment of logic that made any sense was that Ikto had planned to gain Asmund's trust and lure him downstairs. That plan was a double-edged sword and could have easily gone sour. Who knows what this other gold nut would do if he claimed the gauntlet for himself? Just as Hedil was about to lose patience with O9's never-ending excuses for why the greenhouse shouldn't be opened, a hissing cloud of steam introduced Ikto's arrival back from the medical bay.
Young lad, if you have a minute,
said Ikto to Hedil, who was pouring a mug of the unusual black brew he had yet to taste.
Would you lend me a hand downstairs? Asmund needs surgery, and his arm's in a really bad state. I need to keep him steady to operate on his arm.
Hedil checked with Astrid to see if she minded being alone with the stubborn, thin man. She shrugged indifferently and let him go chop Asmund's arm off with Icto. When the Prince of Helheim was gone, Astrid decided some investigating needed to be done. Norsemen were used to strange encounters in foreign lands they pillaged. They often found new gods to worship, different weapons, darker skins, peculiar bricks and sophisticated walls, smelly foul meals, and surprising tongues that spoke the weirdest languages. That didn't make the contents and the owners of this particular room less odd. Deeper than Vanaheim's southern seas, the stairway kept diving downwards forever. Hedil felt dizzy and nearly lost balance on a few occasions, gripping onto Icto's brittle shoulders to avoid falling.
Not long to go,
said Icto reassuringly.
A robe and a large pail wouldn't be a bad idea,
said Hedil light-heartedly.
A wishing well lived. How ingenious, Hedil of Njal. You didn't strike me as having an inventive mind, although I suppose everybody has hidden talents to share. And you, Nibelungen dweller, what is your secret? Explain to me how any of this is possible.
Icto clumped down the porous metal steps in thought.
No use holding back now. Hedil, have you not traveled abroad with your conquering kin to exotic lands where things didn't quite make sense? In some regions of this realm of earth and sea, there are men and women who have dug chasms deeper than this one with their own sweat and blood. Monuments of incomprehensible stature for the times when they were made can be found beyond the curves of the great oceans. A few luminescent sparks and bizarre tastes shouldn't bother the likes of you, Prince Hedil. Relatively speaking, I understand that our humble abode may appear haunted by the tormented ghosts of hell, or blessed by the enchanted saber wand of a sacred forest spectress. But it all comes down to technology.
Hedil didn't interrupt.
What you know can frighten the ignorant. What you've learned from people who know more can harm and twist the course of life. But I'm convinced it could also be beneficial. A bright young lad like yourself would flourish under the right circumstances. Learning to murder with explosive power and rage must be useful at times. Yet when time places you in the wrong place, one's assassination and pillaging skills become futile. Oh, you'd think I would have had time to design a simple lift to take us down to where we've arrived. But the time it took to get here and exchange thoughts would have been wasted, wouldn't it?
Icto Ixin flicked his palm Hedil protected his eyes with his hands as 1,000 lights lit up a large circular hall of slate. It was cold down here. A surreptitious breeze crept out of a central gap in the slate floor and gave Hedil goosebumps. Ikto swiped his palm again, and the lights dimmed enough to reveal quivering torches burning in the palms of 9 giants. Great statues of slate carved out of the rock walls.
Impressive, aren't they?
Said Ikto, spinning on one foot to acknowledge all the gods or kings of old.
I would love to take credit for such daunting sculptures, but you can only tap me on the back for the diaphanous editions. I expect you never knew such colossal works of art existed in the depths of your Odin's Island? They're so old, you would never believe me. Same goes for my old bones. And what's down there, as a matter of fact? Well, she's not that old, but you get my meaning.
Said Ikto, opening in the slate a flight of narrow stairs down to a metal gate. Hedil couldn't believe it. The cradle of his people's beliefs and traditions stood before him in all their might and magnificence. Could the forges be here too? He didn't let his excitement distract him from why he was there.
Ikto, where is Asmund? You'll find him down there. I'll go fetch the necessary tools in the vault, between the legs of the distinct portrait of Odin himself. And then I'll be right behind you.
There was a crack in the wall between Odin's enormous boots, and it thickened as Ikto approached, widening until a shower of warm light welcomed Ikto into the so-called vault. The sliding doors of slate remained open, and Hedil saw the thin man searching for something in trunks and shelves. The grey steps downwards were relatively steep, and Hedil descended cautiously. He didn't want to end his journey as pathetically as King Andvar, who was said to have tripped and broken his neck while strolling down a few slippery steps to feed some ducks in a pond. Andvar wasn't remembered for his fabulous lost treasures, including a ring that showered with gold anyone who chose to wear it, despite its fatal curse. Or was he remembered for his short stature, but primarily for being a clumsy king?
Wouldn't want to do an Andvar.
Halfway down, the gate ahead slid open in synchrony with a hidden one behind him. Hedil battered the metal boundary with his boots and fists, but he couldn't even dent it.
Ikto, let me out. What are you up to?
Cried Hedil, turning to see what danger might await him. down the set of steps. Ikto popped his head round the slate wall at the bottom of the stairs.
I'm already here. No need to panic. I came the other way.
Hedil wasn't convinced, but he couldn't deny Ikto's presence down below.
Asmund's ready when you are, Hedil.
Ikto held an obsidian black leather bag with dyed bone handles and withdrew a wooden hilt without a blade.
So many instruments to choose from. This one would do wonders if I knew how to get the damn thing to work. My mama could. She could do many things.
He said, his voice fading as he walked out of sight.
She was the one who told me to come here. Thought it would save me. Save our species.
Hedil heavily breathed in and out and entered the pit. The gate slammed shut behind him. Asmund was there, strapped to a chair. But so was the creature that almost killed him and Kyoko. The waspy great lump of ebony scales and jaws that missed its prey and was swept away by a terrific blizzard. Ikto stood patiently next to Asmund, ignoring the deadly dragon only feet away behind him.
What's wrong? Oh, the pet lizard. Don't worry about her. The old lass wouldn't harm a fly. Well, unless I told it to.
Ikto put the hilt back into the well-worn clay bag and extracted another object. This time a small rod that snapped into a spear that retracted as soon as Ikto felt the job needed something more adequate for Asmund's injury. Asmund sat there with his head low. He looked unconscious and was sweating heavily. Ikto kept up his game of searching for the precise tool, as if waiting for Hedil to say something about how ludicrously impossible the bag was to contain so many weapons all at once.
You were thinking, perhaps, how wonderful this bag of tricks is, huh? It belonged to my dearest mother, Ironica. She kept it for me in less than an atom's space in her skull. Strange place to hide her lifetime collection of legendary armors, wouldn't you say? Not when you know how to extract the invisible puck and synthesize it quicker than it takes to transform dioxygen into carbon dioxide.
Ikto saw Hedil's impatience and rising irritation.
I know. I ramble on a lot after waking up. Sleeping for years on end is more tiresome than you think. I always need to stretch my legs and chew someone's ears off. Helps beat the system back into shape. What have you done to Asmund? And what is that dragon doing here?
Hedil touched Asmund's warm forehead and lifted his head. The eyes were open, but half dead.
He's been drugged.
The prince moved his hand slowly to grip his sword's hilt. But it wasn't there.
Oh, your sword is gone. You must have left it upstairs.
Icto pulled one last weapon from the brown, scaly bag. A short metal rod with a thin beam of red light darting forwards.
Here, use this to save your friend. His arm is lost. If you don't cut it off, you'll lose him too.
Hedil was fed up with Icto's deceit and theatrics. He channeled a simmering rage from his toes up to his chest and let a wave of hot anger come crashing through his veins, pumping raw energy into his expanding muscles. Claws ripped out of his fingers and his teeth were sharp as split flint. Icto looked surprised, but not alarmed enough, especially when Hedil flung his right hand towards Icto's head with flying razors ready to slice his flesh and bones to shreds. The claws sank through Icto's cheeks and mouth and exited his nape and neck without a trace of blood or a hint of discomfort on Icto's face. The bag fell to the floor, and Icto vanished.
Up here, Drog.
Icto Ixen was now standing above them, on the rim of the dragon pit where he and Asmund were now prisoners.
I wasn't trying to deceive you, Vikings. Look, if you want to save Asmund, use one of the weapons in that bag and sever off the arm. The red laser was a good idea, in my medical opinion. It cuts and cauterizes all in one go. Others get the job done too. But that arm is useless. Bite it off if you like, or feed it to Voluspa. Oh my, what dreadful manners. Manners. Voluspa, this is Hedil, whom you already know. And Asmund, I think you already know quite a bit. Hedil and Asmund, this is Voluspa.
Hedil growled at the man above and wasted no time. The Drog pounced into the air and flew towards Icto, who was amused by the brave attempt to escape or kill the captor. A web of scarlet threads stung and stuck to Hedil before he could reach Icto. They singed his hairy skin and let him drop like a dead weight back into the pit. He slithered back to his human form, clothed in a slightly torn baggy attire he was now used to wearing to avoid ending up naked after a sudden bloodbath on a summer's day.
One more Drog. Thanks for the unexpected gift. Ciao,
said Icto, shuffling his feet as he walked away. Hedil groaned and got as far away as he could from the dragon, from Voluspa. Hilda had mentioned this old woman's name. She used to be of some importance in the woodland realms, and she was of some assistance to his beloved when she was young, apparently. What for? He had not been told. The dragon didn't look as terrifying as before. It looked sick, drained, withered and weak, like a tree about to blossom before dying. It opened one eye and shifted its huge bulk onto its hind legs, then collapsed.
Voluspa, is this really you? Why did you try to end my life on the plains?
The dragon shook its scales and raised its head to the invisible lid of lightning placed over the pit. A faint croak slipped from its jaws, then built up exponentially to a roar of terror. A few flames sailed through the dragon's fangs, and the beast fell once again. A wave of crackling scales, like rolling shells being sucked into an incoming wave, began to mutate into a blur of grey. A blonde mane began to replace the forked spine, and the blotched body of an old woman flopped onto the slate floor at Hedil's feet. She wept bitterly. Hedil could hear her bones cracking as she tried to sit upwards. She croaked. The witch's groom, you came to save me. A loyal drog of Nibelwood. I am so glad. Voluspa looked upwards in anguish. Make haste. Give me the wooden weapon.
Which weapon, Voluspa? The one with the wooden hilt?
Quick! I haven't got long. He'll make me eat you. He knows how to enslave us, to force us to transform. Who'd have guessed that being a magnificent drog or dragon for so long would be so fatally exhausting? King Refr will have a rude awakening. That's it, the black bag. With all these quirks and oddities beneath the mountains, it feels like a bad dream, doesn't it? If you had joined us earlier, son of Skuld, you would have noticed similar abnormal belongings in bloody hoof caves.
Meaning?
Asmund grumbled in the middle of a flow of gibberish. He had a vague memory of having already met this old woman in the streets of Vanaheim. Or was it down the lane leading to the woods? Rings! Voluspa coughed feverishly, dripping blood down her neck. Rings brought me here, like that demon. Well done. Give me the scourger. Hedil couldn't find anything else except the wooden hilt in the old leather bag. Where were all the other weapons? Meanwhile, Asmund tried to untie himself. The saber! Give it to me! Hedil held the wooden stick in his right hand and didn't understand what was so important about it. Why would Voluspa waste her last few breaths for this? he held out the baton of dark gnarled wood, and Voluspa snatched it from him. A smell of ozone and blood filled the air. Hedil's face was golden, his eyes alive with ghostly gilt light. A song from hell's corpses invaded his eardrums like an eerie lament of a dying whale. It petrified the fierce beast inside him, and he stumbled backwards onto the floor. Voluspa showed her black teeth in a somber grin, and swished the fiery blade to and fro, scorching the air with the promise of death. A scorcher. So long it has been, said Voluspa, peering into the radiating golden light that groaned for darkness to devour. She lunged forwards with unexpected velocity, and Hedil's slit eyes watched the blade sink through Asmund's arm and remove it like a lizard's tail. Asmund wailed as his straps on fire melted away, and his sliced off member twitched briefly on the cold ground. Now we go, loyal Drog. Carry the buck. Hedil didn't know what she meant, but he shifted into a Drog to hoist the lifeless Asmund over his shoulder and follow the old lady holding the haunted blade. She easily blasted through the metallic gates ahead and staggered up the flight of stairs. Finally free from her lair, Voluspa absorbed her surroundings. The giants of stone judged her in silence. The Order of the Nine, it exists. The what? Responded Hedil, thinking the old lady had mumbled something to him. My dear child, said Voluspa telepathically. Her vision blurred, and she thought her Sune was there. In Hedil's shoes, her legs gave way, and she fell to her knees. The haunted saber lost its fiery howl of light and rolled towards Hedil. He picked it up and stuffed it into the leather bag. Wait here a bit. I need to check the vault for other weapons or clues to where the forges are. Voluspa shook her head and whimpered. No, we have to go. The Sadists will be back soon. All you'll ever need is in that bag. The mind commands it. Think of an object it contains, and you will find it. Hedil didn't listen. The forges probably don't even exist. Maybe, but Asmund found a blade of gold in the canteen and a real gripper. I don't think they belong to Ikto's mother. He dropped Asmund beside her and shifted back to his human state. Despite Voluspa's rational remarks that he didn't really listen to about where the sadist really came from, Hetty left her with the one-armed warrior. Bugs will be bugs, she sighed desperately. Voluspa watched him tossing objects over his head in a distant storage room beneath one of the titanic gods of slate. By the time Hedil had returned with nothing but a simple velvet pouch of rings that he tied to his belt, a score of beastly shadows had sneaked into the god's arena and surrounded the three fugitives.
Clever Nidhogger,
Shouted Ikto, exiting the secret passage between the glaive and the bare foot of another giant.
It is time to cleanse your own sins tonight, Mrs. Voluspadrina Woodshade. Your pack of slaves has come to bid you farewell.
A whirlpool of growls echoed throughout the hall. Hedil switched back to a drog and faced the new threat. Voluspa closed her eyes and tried to reach out to the Nebelwood deserters. They didn't reply.
Don't waste your breath. They follow Thor's guidance now,
Said Ikto, walking forwards, swiping his palm. One of the female drogs walked out of the shadows.
Do you miss Cassadrina? Why did you abandon her? You never told me. And the child, is he well?
What have you done to him? Snarled Voluspa.
I didn't do anything. However, your protege removed his head a few years ago. An eye for a skull, I was told.
The female drog stopped several sticks away from Voluspa.
Don't you recognize her?
Ikto played with the luminous buttons twirling over his palm, and artificial lights floated down from the shadows to highlight the exact spot where the drog was standing. Ikto flicked a finger, and the drog became human. She wore unusual clothing, like Ikto's, and large green-rimmed glasses over a small round nose. She was relatively young. Her wandering eyes had that undead absent look, and she clearly showed no emotion when Voluspa called out her name. Cassandrina, how can this be? You haven't aged a bit.
A Nidhogger should know. Now stretch your wings and swoop back down to your kennel.
Ikto tapped his palm, and Voluspa's skin darkened.
Look, Cassandrina. Look at what your lost love has become.
Voluspa screamed insanities at Ikto and tried to resist the chemical reaction spreading throughout her body. A scorcher. Hedil heard the old woman whose lips didn't move. You found your saber wand, said a soft voice in Volusper's mind. Cassandrina, my poor Cassandrina, I'm so sorry. You found your saber wand, repeated Cassandrina, as if lobotomized. Voluspa shed a tear. She realized her companion of long ago was remembering the prelude to an argument they had had before Voluspa's farewells. Back then, in the tropical wilderness of a Norwegian island, Voluspa had not found her saber wand and had blamed Cassandrina for losing it on a day of such importance. It was paramount that she travel with her scorcher, her only safety belt for a dive into the unknown. Sune wasn't born yet, but Voluspa was so obsessed with the wells that they had found within the split roots of a giant ash tree that she would not postpone the expedition. Suicide down the well. Yes, it was a death trap, my love. We should have left together. I've missed you so much. Cassandrina, forgive me. But this man wants to harm us.
He wants to harm you,
said Icto, reading a floating blue screen.
Or your withered bride if you don't hurry. Our guests upstairs await.
Hedil didn't wait for the disturbing reunion to reach its climax. His Drogar eyes pierced through the distant gloom and assessed the threat. He didn't want to fight his own kind. He spotted the rebellious leader, Refer, who'd once called him a king's pet when they first met in Nebelwood. This wasn't the same charismatic man who'd made him almost doubt the need to hang on to his humanity. Refer had lost his poise and spark of unpredictable youth. He didn't react to Hedil's darting gaze and drooled like a dimwit. The dozens of other drogs were lost in a haze, swaying their heads lethargically, as if following an invisible path, like a green bottle fly, randomly hovering to secret coordinates in a bubble of air. The odds were against him. He followed his gut and rushed across the hall like an arrow in flames and thrust his arm forwards to rip out Icto's windpipe. A clash of claws blocked his blow. Two drogs with trembling biceps pushed Hedil backwards, and other three appeared behind him and slammed their clawed hands onto his shoulders, lacerating his skin and forcing Hedil to his knees. Icto smiled and brushed his gorgon blue hair out of his face.
Bad dog. You need housebreaking, don't you?
Icto tapped his palm annoyingly. Refer emerged from the darkness and stood beside the thin man, still glued to his hallucinogenic witchcraft.
Actually,
said Icto, without raising his eyes.
I don't think we'll be needing another Drog's blood. There's no need to spoil the broth. And you all have done and are doing a fabulous job. Refer, my praised pet, finish him off. There should be enough mincemeat for all of you.
Hedil saw a ripple of microspasms fluctuating around Refer's snarling lips, and heard in his mind the woodland king say with utter disgust,
Pet, leave the wounded one. The dragon lady's out of juice. We've squeezed as much out as we could. So you can add her to the menu.
Icto squinted and drew imaginary runes with his finger.
For the love of Thor, I said you could dispose of the Drogon dragon now.
For the love of Thor. How many times had Voluspa heard the smug jailer praise the Norse god before digging a metal pin into her or playing with her brain cells? That voice! She snapped. The dragon ripped out of its human shell and rousted the lot of them. As they sizzled and melted into deformity, Voluspa bit chunks out of their corpses. With a clawed wing, she seized Cassandrina. Her human features had returned, although one could not really tell, and Voluspa bit off her head, still burning as it slid down her gullet. Icto glared at the horrific spectacle. He then observed Refer's delayed response to his orders and decided to increase the triggered pain throbbing in the Drog's neck.
Technical failure. I can't face gathering samples again. But perhaps I should euthanize the whole batch.
Hedil tried to resist, flexing his powerful muscles, only to feel sharp claws digging deeper into his shoulders. This was probably it. He wouldn't see his troubled wife again, or his odd child. As Refer held up his long claws, glowing in the bonfire of his dead friends, Hedil surprised himself by thinking of the one he suspected had saved him from the salamander dragon. The one who listened and understood him. The one who combed her coal hair religiously by the oily black sea, dreaming under the moon of her lost home of rice, of foxes with 9 tails. Kyoko. The lights went out. Far above the dragon pit and the hall of the gods, O9 finally led Astrid into the greenhouse. She smiled at how easily he had caved in compared to Hedil's poor attempts to corrupt the odd man, and she casually explored the dark place. A fire with no smoke in the ceiling gradually cast more and more light until Astrid saw the sticky green substance she was stepping in. It was trickling from a smashed metallic casket that was linked with rubbery tubes to glass coffins, like the one in the middle of the room. The latter was clamped to a thick slab of stone and contained eldritch red claws like spider legs connected to gloves that were dangling from circular portholes around the glass pod. In another transparent coffin, Astrid saw a female corpse. Nothing unusual there, apart from the absence of privacy for the dead woman in a see-through box. "Who's this, Bonebag?" asked Astrid. "Haven't had time to bury her yet." 09 didn't flinch and picked up the gauntlet that had rolled under the table. "An acquaintance from the woods." "Ah, caught yourself a drog, have you? How did you die? Crushed by one of your megaliths? Or did you drink some of that black sap?" Using the gauntlet, 09 picked up the massive sword with one hand and frowned. The metal had lost its gilt coating. "Young lady, this test subject, resting girl, I meant to say, is far from pushing up daisies. She has been helping us with a long-term project of great importance." "So you are in league with the undead," said Astrid, letting go of the woman's left nipple she was fiddling with and pulling out her hand from a gloved porthole. "For that, she'd have to be dead." "But to be undead, you only have to have been dead, and not quite alive either." "Astrid, she hasn't died yet. She's only resting. I wouldn't wake her up, though. Her feral tempers are not quite worth the trouble. Glove or no glove," said 09, referring to both lab props and the gauntlet he was wearing. "Little Nashers can be real bear traps, can't they? Better leave Princess Spithair to her beauty sleep. She needs it by the look of things," said Astrid, secretly admiring the woman's locks of snow. Moans of agony spiraled from the chamber. 09 left the gauntlet and the blade on an empty incubator and hastily walked away to assist the sick Tora. Her eyes were bulging out of her sockets, and her lips were green. Blood was beginning to dribble out of her ears and nostrils, and 09 felt that her pulse was beating dangerously fast. With a quick swipe over his palm, 09 conjured a series of bright frames and colourful runes that hovered and danced over his hand, spinning and dashing away at the touch of a fidgety finger. A luminous needle slid out of his index finger and prodded Tora's neck. A trickle of raspberry blood snailed down her neck, while 09 checked his palm again like a fortune teller. His fingers stopped fidgeting. Poison. She was poisoned? That was O'Nine's last thread of thought as his head left his body and clunked against the pale floor, leaving behind the dash of slug-slime colourless blood. The tremendous swipe of the giant's glaive that Astrid was wielding violently twisted her own body so painfully she let go of the blade, and the glove slipped off her hand to smash into a large mirror on the opposite wall. Sparkles of blue light burst out of a hidden alcove packed with wires and metal boxes. Something elsewhere, and in a sizzle of oil and burnt hair, the octagonal room disappeared. Astrid gasped. She was alone in the middle of a dark crystal cave. Half a moon in a natural slate window above lit huge metal pipes beneath her, all directed towards the center of the cavern like sun rays. There was a rattle coming from where the lab used to be. Astrid saw clouds of steam reveal themselves in the moonlight, and then she heard the heavy breathing. Snowflake, she's awake. I'm warning you. Whoever you are, stay back. I have the blade the size of a bear and an army ready to strike, said Astrid, beginning to tremble. She needed to reach the others outside. The door had gone, and all she had to do was not fall to her death over the unlit bridge, and maybe not take the wrong turning. If she could see anything through the cobwebs. The willowy woman with pale hair stepped into the pool of light. Astrid held her breath. Is this the bear's blade you mentioned? Said the woman, tapping the black weapon with her heel. Are you one of Zero's guards? Where did the palace go? Astrid tiptoed towards the open door. Zero's dead. Didn't shed any blood. For bare blood's sake. Over there somewhere. And who are you? I am Astrid. Simple lass with simple desires. Nice meeting you. Farewell. And where's the torturer? Asked the woman, picking up O'Nine's head. The sleeper. He's downstairs with Hedil, helping Asmund. Oh, buggery. The witch is Hedil, and Kyoko's Asmund, you say? Interesting. Not that I give a rat's ass. What should we do then, cornfield girl? See who has the longer blade? Perhaps pay the torturer a visit and pay my respects to the Prince of Vanaheim to thank him personally for when I stayed at Gren Elgar. Or should we save the son of Skuld? Who in Hogshead are you? Said Astrid, noticing the glove faintly gleaming in the reflected dying light. I am Skuld's dear Kara, and I'm hungry. Think you can run faster than I can in the dark? Astrid lost her cool and was ready to sprint into the night. You look like you've got a lot on your plate already. Don't you want to find that plumhead Icto first and unleash that boiling rage on him instead? I would if I were you. He killed my friend here. Tora poisoned her with the coal sap. Plumhead wouldn't do that. He'd stick you in a coffin first and play with your insides until you do whatever he wants you to do. Kara stepped into the lab's green liquid that hadn't vanished with all the walls and equipment. She wiped her bare foot on the pipes she was standing on. Ugh, disgusting. Dragon's blood, they called it. All I know is that it stinks of frog's breath. That Icto needs to be taught a lesson. His hospitality is as flawed as my front row of teeth. He went down that hole there. The metallic staircase was still intact. Gunnar, Icto, they all need to pay. After you, Astrid. Should I fetch the muzzle outside while you deal with Hammer Father? Asked Astrid, picking up the gauntlet and slipping it on. You're coming with me, growled Kara. Take the bear's blade if you want. Under a stellar sky, Harald heard a distant explosion. The stone walls were gone, and the mountain entrance suddenly opened. Growls erupted in the surrounding wood. There was only one way to go. See you next time for chapter 16 of the Hildar Chronicles. Thank you for watching.